Back in the 1990s, while the Soviet Union was collapsing and the United States stood alone as the global superpower, one political theorist decided he had finally cracked the code of human civilization. His name was Francis Fookooyama, and he became famous for declaring what may be one of the most embarrassingly overconfident predictions ever made by a public intellectual: the end of history. According to Fukuyama, liberal democracy and global capitalism had essentially won forever. Humanity, in his view, had reached the final stage of political evolution. The big ideological battles were supposedly over. From now on, nations would gradually become more democratic, more globalized, more peaceful, and more economically interconnected. History had arrived at its happy ending. Reality immediately responded by smashing that theory into pieces with a baseball bat. Within a few decades, almost every major assumption behind Fukuyama's worldview looked naive, arrogant, or outright detached from human nature. The world did not become more stable. It became more fractured. It did not become more unified. It became more tribal, angry, and chaotic. Liberal democracies did not peacefully absorb the globe. Instead, authoritarian powers adapted, evolved, and in many cases became stronger than ever. The problem with Francis Fookooyama was not merely that he made a bad prediction. Everyone makes bad predictions. The real issue is that his entire worldview was built on a cartoonishly simplistic understanding of humanity. He treated history like a video game campaign that had finally reached the last level, as if thousands of years of conflict, nationalism, ethnic rivalry, power struggles, and civilizational competition would suddenly disappear because Western elites declared themselves victorious after the Cold War. It was intellectual narcissism disguised as philosophy. Fukuyama looked at one specific historical moment, American dominance in the 1990s, and mistook it for the permanent destiny of mankind. That is like a stock trader having one good month and announcing he has solved economics forever. The arrogance was breathtaking. The most hilarious part is how quickly events humiliated his thesis. The 21st century became a graveyard for his assumptions. Russia re-emerged aggressively under Vladimir Putin. China became an authoritarian technological superpower without adopting Western liberal democracy. Religious extremism exploded across parts of the Middle East. Nationalism returned across Europe. Populist movements surged in the United States itself. Social cohesion in Western countries deteriorated. Trust in institutions collapsed. Political polarization became so severe that many democracies now resemble permanent psychological civil wars. So much for the end of history. Even worse, modern liberal democracies increasingly look exhausted, unstable, and spiritually hollow. Birth rates are collapsing. Social isolation is rising. Citizens distrust their governments, media, corporations, and even each other. Entire generations feel alienated and economically trapped despite living in supposedly advanced systems. Yet people like Francis Fookooyama still talk as if liberal democracy is some inevitable destination for humanity, rather than one political arrangement among many competing systems. His mistake was assuming that economic modernization automatically produces Western-style liberal values. China alone destroyed that theory. The Chinese Communist Party essentially looked at Western political dogma and said, "We'll take the capitalism, technology, infrastructure, and industrial power. You can keep the lectures about universal liberal democracy." And economically, China became powerful enough to challenge the very global order Fukuyama thought was permanently settled. That alone should have ended his credibility. But there is also something deeply irritating about the tone of thinkers like Fukuyama. They often present themselves as neutral scholars while quietly assuming that Western liberal ideology is the natural peak of civilization. It is a worldview soaked in elite smugness. The average person is expected to believe that history just happened to culminate in the exact political and cultural preferences of late 20th century Western academics. What a coincidence! Human beings are not machines programmed to converge into one universal system. People care about identity, religion, culture, tradition, tribe, power, meaning, and belonging. These forces do not disappear because economists and political theorists want a frictionless global marketplace. In fact, attempts to erase those instincts often make them return even more violently. Francis Fookooyama fundamentally underestimated how irrational, emotional, and conflict-driven human beings really are. He mistook a temporary geopolitical victory for a permanent transformation of mankind itself. History did not end. It laughed at him,